Don't you edit?
Okay. What you need to do.
Did you get my text?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
got it. Thanks. Yeah. Hey, Charlie, how are you doing?
Hanging in there.
Good, good to see ya. Hopefully we won't do anything to trigger.
Yes.
Okay.
They were starting to trail.
Nice to see you back.
Thank you.
Hey, how we doing?
Okay.
No, I haven't gotten the bill yet. It's an ongoing process. They're not good. So basically, we're gonna do, so checking tomorrow and the bills check. So once the job's done, it goes. So I'm just gonna. So was that you?
Well, I didn't get my medicine the last couple of days. I forgot to take it. So I'm feeling the effects.
Believe anything he says.
I can tell you
So
what.
I took I got 7 pills a day. I took them today, so it's kind of unsettled me a little bit. One's blood pressure, one's all kinds. My diabetic and whatever. Yeah. See, I thought I had taken it, but I looked on my counter, on my little, I have a little list I use. Uh-oh. Yeah. Hey, so you're doing YouTube business?
She brought down.
Oh, yeah.
She, I
Jim?
don't
How are you?
Just
Is that a loaded
you
question?
got one hair out
Could
of
be.
makes you look
Hopefully
like
better
a
than
cowboy.
last.
Yeah, you've been having a rough time.
Almost hit you. Did you notice it ran fall into you leaving here? Then was backing up my truck in the same car.
Oh, don't do it. Are you better today as opposed to last week?
A little bit, just having a tough time getting to see you. You didn't have to use that, did you?
No, it just moved out of the way because we're fixing the curtain for Rosie.
So long, no one.
She doesn't like that curtain.
You gotta sit
Hey,
there.
Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no white, you can't see the light.
I was looking at the chair.
Yeah, someone moved it so they could, fix the curtains.
I know.
Someone?
They're 2 hours knowing what you're
Someone
gonna
just tripped you too.
Not a bee problem.
That's when you start watching their TV.
Yeah, Jonah was talking about it.
Yeah, there's nothing on. Do you wanna see?
Something out
Better than sitting and thinking about it.
of the few that they can't get to. They were up in the east. There was some bees that came back. They got them. And a couple of days we had nothing.
Wow, that's great. I have to remember that. We had, a bee service come up, professional bee service, dedicated to bee service. They charged us $300 to clean out the bees. And they did the same thing, they just vacuumed them out. And, 2 months later, they're back. It's, terrific to do this stuff. But yeah, next time I'll remember to do it.
I think he used $250 because that might make a difference how big the hive is too. I don't know.
Right, right. This hive's pretty big, it was all underground.
Underground.
Yeah, he thought that it was just right there. And when you start spraying and digging in, they were popping up all over the ground.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. Are we awake? I realize Sandy and Terry's not here, but it's awful quiet out there. Before we begin class this morning, Dave, would you start us off with a word of prayer?
My dear Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Father, we're so thankful for this time to come together and study another portion of your word. We pray that we would diligently search your scriptures so we might be better able to serve you and to teach others. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.
All right, we're continuing in our study from Exodus chapter 28, and we're studying about the garments that the priest would wear. And last Sunday we discussed the ephod, and on Wednesday we discussed the breastplate. Is there any questions on either one of those? Okay, let's continue on then. Let's begin this morning by reading from Exodus 28. I'm going to read verses 31 through 35. Exodus 28, verses 31 through 35. And Jim, would you read those?
28.
Exodus 28, verses 31 through 35.
You shall make the robe of the ephod all of blue. There shall be an opening for his head in the middle of it. It shall have a woven binding all around its opening, like the opening in a coat of mail, so that it does not tear. And upon its hem you shall make pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet all around its hem, and bells of gold between them all. A golden bell and a pomegranate, and a golden bell and pomegranate upon the hem of the robe all around. And it shall be upon Aaron when he ministers, and its sound will be heard when he goes into the holy place before the Lord, and when he comes out, that he may not die.
In studying this, there's some things that we don't know because we weren't there, but we've mentioned this before, how specific God is and exactly what he wants, and how he wants everything, and there's a reason for that in there. When God says something, we're to do it exactly the way he says. We don't get to make choices. And specifically here, this is going to make a robe of the ephod. What is a robe?
Something that covers everything.
Yeah, it's used the same way here in the Old Testament that we use it today, isn't it? Most of the time when someone puts on a robe, they're putting on something over something else, isn't it? It's not an undergarment, it's to go over garments. Let's turn and read from Isaiah chapter 61. And we'll read verse 10. Isaiah 61 and verse 10. And Carl, would you read that?
Verse 10,
Yes.
I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful in my God. For he hath clothed me with garments of salvation. He has covered me with a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels.
Okay, what I wanted to point out here is in verse 10 here, he has clothed me with garments, so you have clothes on, and then the next sentence, he has covered me with the robe of righteousness. So you have clothes, and then a robe goes on over the top of the clothes, so it's an outer garment. Now let's go back just a couple of chapters to Isaiah 59, and we'll see the same idea here. Isaiah 59 and verse 17. And Jerry, would you read that?
Yeah, 59:17. For he put on the righteousness as a breastplate and the helmet of salvation on his head, and he put another garment of vengeance for clothing, and had clad it with zeal of a cloak.
Okay, again, we have garments for clothing, and then that last sentence, clad or covered with a cloak. The word that's translated cloak here is the same Hebrew word that's translated robe, and most of the time, majority of the time we see this Hebrew word, it's translated robe. Here it's translated cloak, but we still get the same idea.
Well, cloak is more like a cape, though, isn't it?
It's still an outer garment.
Yeah, but it
it's the same
doesn't have
Hebrew word.
sleeves. It doesn't have sleeves.
What?
A cloak. It
What?
wouldn't have sleeves. It's like a cape.
Well, I don't know about that, but I know, does a robe have sleeves? Most of the time they
Yeah.
do, but this is the same Hebrew word that's translated robe most of the time, and here it's translated cloak. So also, doesn't the King James, doesn't it say coat?
Back in 28,
Yes. Instead of robe, didn't it say coat in verse 31?
makeup. No, okay. What words are we making reference to?
Exodus 28:31.
31, and you shall make the robe
Okay.
of the ephod all of blue.
Thinking of a different word, and I know there was a word that the King James version described it as coat. Maybe it's the tunic, but go ahead, Carl.
According to this, it's cut kind of like what we would call a poncho.
Right.
that had a hole in the middle for its head. So it wouldn't be a zip-up robe like we think of a robe, but it's got a hole in it. Today we call those ponchos.
Right, yeah, that's the idea. Chris, did you have a comment?
And my dictionary defines it as this particular Hebrew word as a sleeveless, cloak-like outer garment.
Well,
For some reason, they decided to translate it as cloak here. We don't know why, but
Right.
sleeveless, cloak-like outer garment.
in my studies, that for the robe and the tunic, both said they could have sleeves and not have sleeves. But most of the opinions that I've seen, yeah, they think the robe was sleeveless, and which, you know, a poncho, like Carl was just talking about, a poncho doesn't have sleeves, does it? It's just kind of a piece of cloth and with a hole in it, and you put it over your head. Let's look at, let's go back, we've read this before, but let's read it again this morning. Leviticus chapter 8 and verse 7. This is where we get the order of how Aaron was to get dressed, how Moses was supposed to be. Leviticus 8, and we're going to read verse 7. And Stacy, would you read that?
And he put the tunic on him, girded him with the sash, clothed him with the robe, and put the ephod on him. And he girded him with the intricately woven band of the ephod, and with it tied the ephod on him.
Okay, so again, we haven't talked about the tunic yet, but they had the tunic on, had the sash, and then the robe went on, and then the ephod went on. And if you continue to read, then of course the breastplate went on the ephod after all that. So again, it's something, it's an outer garment. But yeah, most of the opinions were that this robe was sleeveless. What color was the robe?
Purple? No, wrong one.
Blue.
Yeah, blue. Verse 31, make a robe of blue.
Well, purple is blue to me.
Well, I don't think God's colorblind, so.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Now, this was not an uncommon garment that we read about in the Old Testament, robes. We won't take time to read it, but in 1 Samuel 15, when Samuel goes to tell Saul that God has taken the kingdom away from him, and Samuel gets done talking, he turns around to leave. Saul reaches up and grabs Samuel because he doesn't want him to leave, and he tears his robe. Samuel had a robe on. And then also in 1 Samuel 24, if you remember this story, Saul's out looking for David so he can kill him, and he gets tired and he goes in to rest in a cave. And David and his men were already in the cave. David goes up to Saul and cuts the corner of his robe off so he can tell him later, I could have had you, I could have killed you right then, but I didn't because I'm not like you, basically. So again, this robe that we're talking about was something that was common that they wore back then. So as Carl brought out, this robe in verse 32 here in chapter 28, there shall be an opening for his head. And this Hebrew word that's translated opening here, majority of the time it's translated mouth, which a mouth is an opening, isn't it? But this opening specifically was for Aaron's head to go through, wasn't it? And this opening is described as being in the middle, in the midst, means in the middle. Let's turn back and read, I'm talking about that. Let's go back a few chapters to Exodus chapter 26. We'll read verse 28. We were talking about the framework for the tabernacle. This same word was used here with Exodus 26 and verse 28. Chris, would you read that?
The middle bar shall pass through the midst of the boards from end to end.
Yeah, the same word that's translated, in the New King James it's translated middle, that the hole will be in the middle. In the King James it's in the midst. Anyway, we get the same idea. These bars that were to go on in the framework to support the boards, they were to go in the midst of the boards, or in the middle of boards. So this hole is to be in the middle of this garment, which is called a robe. And what else do we know about this opening for the head, other than it's going to be in the middle? What else do we know about this opening?
Well, this hole in the middle, then it's got a band around it to reinforce it.
Yeah, it wasn't just some material that was cut that would fray, and I mean, the priests would be taking this on and off, wouldn't they? When they do the service, when they didn't, they got to take them back off. So this robe would be coming on and off, and God did not want it tearing and getting messed up. So here we see it as, here it's described as a woven binding all around its opening. So you might say it was hemmed to support that edge. Let's look at Exodus chapter 26 and verse 4. And Charlie, would you read that? Exodus 26 verse 4.
And thou shalt make loops of blue above the edge of the one curtain from the side edge and the couplet. And likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain and the couplet of the second.
The reason I read this is in Exodus 28:32, it talks about this opening, and that would be a woven binding. That same word that's translated binding is the one that's translated edge here in Exodus 26 verse 4. So along the edge of the opening, there would be, I would say like a hem that would be doubled over or something, so this couldn't tear. But it gives an example of, to get an idea of what this looked like, it gives us an example here, doesn't it? It says it'll have a woven binding all around this opening, like the opening in a coat of mail, so that it does not tear. That's the New King James. The King James says habergeon. Anybody know what a habergeon is?
Must be a
Well, I gave it away, didn't I? I already read from the New King James, a coat of mail. So that gives us an idea, like Carl was talking about a poncho. If you ever studied anything in medieval times, before they put on their armor, they had armor they put on ahead of time to protect themselves, didn't they? Not just the metal armor. They put on a coat of mail, which was sleeveless, and it had a hole for them to put their head through, and it went down to protect their upper body, didn't it? It would have been underneath the armor that they had, but again, this is to protect it. And that's the idea here. You got a piece of a garment, some kind of material that they had woven, and there's a hole in the middle of it, and reinforced around the edge of the hole, and that just went back down over their head. That gives you an idea of what this robe would have looked like. But a coat of mail, it wasn't real long. This robe that we're talking about here is longer. I thought I had missed something on my notes here. Anybody have any idea how long this robe would have been?
Don't give a measurement, does it?
No, it does not. So we have this cloth. It would have been fairly large because it does, this robe goes over the tunic, and everyone, they think it was sleeveless because of the way this description is, a coat of mail, kind of like a poncho, like we already talked about. But it did go down a ways on their body, rather than just maybe to the waist, of what a coat of mail would have been roughly. They think this robe would have been longer than that, because the ephod went to the waist, and then the robe, they think, would have been lower than that. But it's not described how long to make this here, is it, that we see? Then we read in verse 33, you got this robe now, it's a blue robe. There's a hole in the middle and supported, and it drapes over the top of them. And in verse 33 here, there's some things that go on here. It's called a hem. It's talking about the bottom of the robe, the bottom edge. What was going to go on the bottom edge of the robe?
Bells and pomegranates.
Yeah. Pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet all around the hem. So on the bottom of this robe now, you got all these pomegranates that I would say for decoration. And in between the pomegranates, you had a bell. What kind of a bell?
Golden bell.
Golden bell. And they probably weren't very big. It doesn't say, but I'm assuming they weren't real big. But
could hear him when he was coming and going.
right. And again, it's how specific is it here? Not, he doesn't just say pomegranates of blue, purple, scarlet all around, and then bells of gold between them. And to make it clear, verse 34, a golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate. He didn't want them to be confused at all. It's very specific. In between each pomegranate, there was a bell, all the way around the hem on the bottom of this robe. And as Carl's already brought up in verse 35 here, I got my notes all messed up, but there was a reason for it. But before we get to that, let's turn to 1 Kings chapter 7 and read verse 18. First Kings chapter 7 and verse 18. And Dave, would you read that?
So he made the pillars and 2 rows of pomegranates above the network all around to cover the capitals that were on top. And thus he did for the other capitals.
Okay, this is when Solomon's building the temple. And he's got these 2 these 2 pillars. I forget how tall they were. They're really tall. 18 cubits high. And around the top, here's it's described as a capital. Chris has already discussed that, what it kind of looked like, maybe like crown molding around the top of the pillar to make it pretty. And around this capital, what did they have for decoration? Something that looked like pomegranates. So pomegranates being on the bottom of this robe, and we got pomegranates here in the temple when Solomon built it. It was something that was used as decoration, and it was not uncommon because we read about it in other places too. I think Solomon even had some of these pomegranates as decoration on some of the pillars and on some of the things in his own house. So I guess that was common back then for them to have that. Excuse me. Any comments on this so far? You're awful quiet out there.
Boy, you're doing such a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Bob.
In chapter 28, I had it here a minute ago. In verse 35, it says, "And it shall come upon Aaron to minister, and his sound shall be heard when he goes in to the holy place before the Lord, and when he comes out, that he die not." I don't understand the connection of sound and death. I don't know how those are tied together, or am I reading too much into it?
It's not specific here. I'm not sure exactly why either, but I do know that Aaron, he couldn't just decide, I'm gonna go into the most holy place. That was not allowed. There was only certain times that even the high priest could go into the most holy place. So if he, on his own volition, if he decided, I need to get in there and clean something up or whatever, if he was to do that, he would have died. And maybe has something to do with that. Don't do it, and it gives the Aaron an idea that God can hear him coming, so I better not do what I'm not supposed to do. I don't know exactly why. It doesn't say, but yeah, the bells were on the bottom of this garment, and it says so he can be heard going in and coming out. And exactly why, I can't tell you why, but I do know that he was only allowed to go into the most holy place. It may have been once a year, but I know there was only certain times that he could go in the most holy place, the high priest. Go ahead, Carl.
We know that he went in once a year to make sacrifice for himself and for all the people. But did he have other duties to go into that most holy place?
I don't know. I haven't got far enough ahead in all the studying yet to know that for sure. So, but I do know I have read enough to know that there is a verse that says you don't get to walk in here when you feel like it. You walk in here. God wanted to know ahead of time, because why? The ark was in there, and what's it say about the ark? That's where God's presence was. That's where he spoke from. So Aaron couldn't just arbitrarily walk in there. It's kind of like Moses at the burning bush. Take your sandals off, because where you stand is holy ground. Again, they just couldn't come and go in the most holy places they chose. It would have to be certain times, and God would need to know about it. And I don't know if that has anything to do with these bells or not, Bob. I really don't know. Unless is there anything else that you know of, Chris, that would say why?
No, the bottom line is, God says the bells need to ring when you go in and come out, or else you die. And that's the essence of it.
Right. And I thought about when we talked about the courtyard, we talked about this before. It was 7.5 feet high. So the Israelites themselves, unless they were on a hill or something, they would be unable to see in that courtyard. But if Aaron's out in there doing his duty, even the Israelites would be able to hear him too. That might make them feel better to hear the bells ringing, that we got priests in there doing their job. Maybe that's possible too, but I'm not sure. Go ahead, Carol.
Could it maybe have been a form of accountability?
Possibly. Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities here, and the scripture doesn't tell us why, so I don't want to say this was the reason. But as Chris has already brought out, God said do it, so it was done. As simple as that. And he wanted those bells on, and if they didn't have the bells on and he weren't heard, Aaron would have died. So it was, again, we're talking about how specific God is here, and he wants them to follow his law exactly. If they didn't put the bells on, what if they put the pomegranates and didn't put the bells on? Aaron would have died. Simple as that. That's what God says. So you got to follow what he says. And some of the reasons we don't know why, but we know it was done because Aaron didn't die. And we got an example of that, don't we? Don't we have a couple of priests that died because they did not follow God's word? A couple of Aaron's sons we're going to read about down the road here. They did not do what God said, and they died on the spot. So there's could have been a lot of reasons for it, and I'm not sure why that is. But again, the bells were on there so he could be heard going in and coming out, so that he wouldn't die. That's what we know. Any comments? Okay. Now that I didn't answer any questions. So to sum up, this blue robe, piece of material, woven, it was blue, had a hole in the middle of it, went over the top of their head, and it was supported, and then had bells and pomegranates on the bottom edge of this robe. Any questions? Any other questions? Maybe I can't answer. Go ahead, Charlie.
Access to God appears to have been very, very narrow. You had access, but again, it was very narrow. And
But we're not limited, are we? In some ways, the Israelites were limited. They had to go through the priests, didn't they? They didn't have a choice. Well, every Christian is a priest. We don't have to rely on anybody else, do we? We have access to God all the time. So we see there's a lot of things in the New Testament we can see that are better than the Old, and there's a lot of that brought up in the book of Hebrews, of course. But yeah, we have access to God all the time if we're a Christian, 24 hours a day. Okay, let's go ahead. It's kind of rereading, but let's go to chapter 39 where we see them make this robe, and we see that they did it exactly as God said. So Exodus 39, and we'll read verses 22 to 26.
What was that?
Exodus 39, verses 22 to 26. And Merwin, would you read that?
He made the robe of the ephod of wings, woven for olive blue. And there was a hole in the midst of the robe, as the hole of a habergeon, with a band round about the hole, that it should not bend. And he made upon the ends of the robe pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet, twine fringed. He made bells of pure gold, and put the bells between the pomegranates upon the hem of the robe, round about between the pomegranates. And a bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate, round about the hem of the robe to minister for him, as the Lord commanded Moses.
We get all the details there, but the most important thing is right that last phrase, isn't it? They did it as the Lord commanded. And we see that all through as we talked about the tabernacle, and we brought this up before. There were times that the Israelites did not do what they should have done. When they came to this tabernacle, they apparently knew that God was very serious because they did exactly what he told them to do. They followed his word completely. And before we move on, is there any comments on the robe here at all? Go ahead, Chris.
We also see in this passage in Exodus 39 that Moses was acting as the mediator, was the go-between between God and Israel. And so it says again, as the Lord commanded Moses. So God gave the command to Moses. Moses then communicated that command to Israel. We find that same exact process today. God commanded Jesus, and then Jesus gave God's word to us. And we find that in John 14 and 16, that this is actually the word of God that was communicated to Jesus, which then he gave to the Holy Spirit gave to us. So Jesus is our mediator, as Moses was theirs.
Right. Again, we read about that in the book of Hebrews again, don't we? And it was prophesied that a prophet would come along like Moses, which was Jesus. And Moses is talked about as being a mediator, and then, yes, Jesus is, of course, the ultimate mediator. Okay, let's go ahead and read further on here in chapter 28. Let's read verses 36 to 38. And Tina, would you read that? Exodus 28, verses 36 to 38.
And they shall make a plate of pure gold, and engrave upon it, like the engravings of the signet, holiness to the Lord. And they shall put it on a blue lace, that it may be upon the mitre, upon the forefront of the mitre it shall be. And it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things, which the children of Israel shall hallow in their holy gift. And it shall be always upon its forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. And they shall embroider the coat with fine linen, and thou shalt make a mitre of fine linen, and that shall make the girdle of needlework.
Okay, now, they were to make a plate. Here it's called a plate. Go ahead, Carl.
We see that they made a plate. In our mind, we think about something we're
Yeah, and we don't know if it was, we don't get any dimensions here again, do we? Just like we did on the road.
It rested on his
It was
forehead.
right here in the front, we know it was that big. We don't know if it was long and skinny, or if it was square, or we don't know, but we know that this plate was made out of pure gold, and it was engraved. And it said, holiness to the Lord. And then this plate,
It hung on a, they call it a blue lace. It's a string or something that hung from Aaron's headpiece. It rested right here.
right, in verse 37, you shall put it on, and you shall put on it, the New King James says a blue cord, with something to attach this plate to the turban, to this headpiece that Aaron had. So it hung right there, and again, that plate was put on the turban or the headpiece, and it said here that it was to be put on the front. So then it would be right here at Aaron's forehead, where it says holiness to the Lord. Let's turn and read from Exodus 29, just next chapter, and let's read verse 6. Because this plate is described a little differently here, and I thought that was interesting. Exodus 29 and verse 6. Donna, would you like to read that?
You shall put the turban on his head, is that it? And put the holy crown on the turban.
So in Exodus 28, it says, make this golden plate. And here in chapter 29, verse 6, on this turban, it's described as a crown. I thought that was interesting. That to me, it kind of gives the idea of maybe a tiara. I don't know if it was like that or not, but here it's described as a crown. In verse 28, it's described as a plate. But again, as Carl's brought up, it wasn't real big, but it was made out of pure gold, and it was engraved with what we see here in verse 36, holiness to the Lord. It's also described as a crown. I didn't write it down. In Leviticus, it's also described as a crown too. Same thing, it talks about the turban and it talks about the crown. So this plate's also described as a crown. I thought that was interesting. And what is the word holy or holiness? What's it mean? We've talked about this many times.
Would be a special place.
Well, just the word holy. What does it mean? Not a place, but the word.
Set apart.
Set apart, yeah. Something special, right? Yeah, set apart, dedicated, sacred, hallowed. That's what this means. So, hallowed to the Lord. And that's turn and read from Leviticus 19. Actually, we won't. I'll just tell you. Leviticus 19, verse 8, the same word that's translated holy here is translated hallowed in Leviticus 19, verse 8. So holy or hallowed to the Lord. And the word Lord here is all in capitals, so it's the term Yahweh, which means the self-existing one. And in most Bibles, as it is in mine, the word Lord should be in all capitals. That tells you that is talking about Yahweh. And this plate or crown, as it's described, is to be attached to the turban. The King James says mitre, right? M-I-T-R-E. What is a turban?
Something that wraps around your head.
It goes on your head. We know that. Yep. We see.
It's a very long piece of cloth.
Well, in our day, we see people wearing turbans, and it's a piece of cloth, and they wrap it around their head. Whether this was that way or not, it doesn't tell us. But it was made out of linen, which we're going to read here in just a few verses. This turban was made out of linen.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Carl.
When Moses pours this oil on Aaron's head, does he take the mitre off first?
I don't think so. How often did they have to wash it? Is that your point? Yeah, because it was full of oil. So this was, we know a turban is whatever it was. I don't know if it was the same then as it is now when we think of turban, or when I think of turban. Aladdin and wrapping their head up, but we know it went on their head, right? This turban went on his head. We just read in Exodus 29 verse 6, when it talked about the crown, Moses was told to put the turban on Aaron's head. So this turban was on his head, and then that plate was on it. So we know all that was on his head. It's kind of like a hat. I'm not sure exactly what this was, but it went on his head. We do know that. But here again, in verse 38, this plate was made and it was tied to the turban. And in verse 38 here it says it was to be on Aaron's forehead, so that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things which the children of Israel hallow and all their holy gifts. What does that mean? What's that saying?
It's the way Lord wanted it. If he didn't have it, it wouldn't work when he made these sacrifices and stuff. There was a way it had to be done in order to be pleasing to God. And that's just one of the details right there, how it had to be done.
Yeah, we just read, Bob asked about the sound and the dying. Things had to be done a certain way, or there was going to be repercussions, there was going to be punishment. And if Aaron didn't have this on, because God wanted it, then things weren't going to go the way they were to be. But what does it mean? It's Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things. What does bear mean?
Carry.
Yeah, it means carry. Carry iniquity. What did the high priest do? He made offerings for them, didn't he? For forgiveness, yearly, Day of Atonement. If Aaron didn't do things the way he was supposed to do, what would happen? They wouldn't get those sins forgotten, would they? So Aaron had an important job, very important, and that's what we're reading about here in verse 38. He's got to do it the right way, and dress the right way, for the people to receive that, their sins to be rolled back. I don't know exactly where Chris will pick up here on Wednesday, but thanks for your time and your attention this morning.
Why are you staring at me?
I got that in the shawl in my bathroom on the door. The black one with pearls on it.